From the heartland of America, it's the Bail in the Midwest podcast, hosted by Shane Rolfe. Executive producer, David Stuckman.
Hello and welcome to the Bail in the Midwest podcast, where we explore a variety of topics related to bail, pretrial release, and the criminal justice system in the Midwest. My name is Shane Rolfe. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Kansas Bail Agents Association, and I've worked in this field for the past 38 years. Now, bail and politics are almost always intertwined, just like other aspects of the law, and in most legislatures, you can't swing a stick without hitting a lawyer. Yet, surprisingly few bail bondsmen actually go into politics. Now, when we think of politicians, we always think of career politicians in Washington who always seem to end up way richer than when they took office. The state legislatures, though, are really not like that. It can be a real sacrifice in terms of jobs and family to actually make the commitment to hold elected office. The pay is usually low, and you have to be away from your job or business and your family, sometimes for months, in a state capital that is often several hours away. So as a result, state legislatures are often filled with people who are retired and have the time, or people who are wealthy enough to take months off their job each year, neither of which describes your average bail bondsman. In the last episode, New Jersey bondsman Kirk Shaw described having to leave dinner and cancel plans to go post a bond. And I just don't think we could just walk out of a legislative debate to make a quick stop at the local jail to bond somebody out. They might object to that. But today, we have a guest who has thrown his hat into the political ring. John Looney is a bail bondsman who is running for a seat in the Montana House of Representatives. He is also the president of the Montana Bail Agents Association. John, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit more about yourself. Obviously you're a bail bondsman, but how did you end up in this field? So we all have our own origin stories that get us this way. How did you end up here?
So my origin story starts off in Montana. When I was 17, I joined. We used to have the deferred enlistment program for the U.S. Army. I joined the Army. Was in the Army for about 10 years, just over 10 years. And then when I left the Army, I got married, and my wife her father was a process server. So I started doing process serving and then opened up my own business. And I got out of the Army. I was in Washington State. We spent a long time in Washington State. I finally could not stand the politics there anymore. And wanted to move back to Montana, so we sold our business and we moved back to Montana. When we moved back to Montana, I worked at, we have what we call pre-releases here in the state. I worked at a pre-release for about a year while I was trying to get on with the Lewis and Clark County Sheriff's Office. And then I worked at the Sheriff's Office for just over 7 years. And during that time, I learned about the bail system. I was a detention corporal and dealt with bail bonds and bail bondsmen all the time. When I made the decision to leave the sheriff's office, I reached out to one of the bondsmen and said, "Hey, in the meantime, while I'm trying to get this other job with the court, would you let me come work for you so I have something? I'm not sitting around not being able to pay my bills." And he said, "Certainly." So I went to work for one of the local bondsmen here for a little while, and then I got hired on at the Lewis and Clark County Justice Court. When I left the Justice Court, I went back to bail bonds. Well, I actually never left. I actually worked bail bonds the entire time. But when I left the Justice Court, I started getting really involved in the bail bond industry, and eventually bought the company from the guy that gave me the job. So when I do classes or when I talk to people about bail bonds or the bail bond industry, I'm in a unique position, or I find myself in a unique position because, number one, I've seen it from, when you look at bail bonds, there's 3 different angles. There's the judicial, there's the law enforcement side, and then there's bail bond side. And I've worked all three sides. So I have a unique perspective on processes and how bail bonds should work and do work in the state of Montana.
Well, I would assume the process business you were in Washington State, I would assume that's a skill set that transfers over, particularly when people miss court and you've got to find people, because as a process server, you have to be able to locate people and get them served with those lawsuits oftentimes.
It does lend itself to the skip tracing portion of it. I guess my claim to fame, or all of my attorneys that I do process serving for, they call because I can find anybody, and that's just a skill that you develop in the process serving world. Because unlike the bond industry, where not all of your clients are trying to hide from you, in the process serving industry, most of them are trying to hide from.
So, I mean, it is helpful to be able to try and find people. I mean, when I first started doing this, I didn't have any clue what I was doing, as far as, figuring out how to write bonds, how to find people. I mean, so you had this old, and you probably remember these from years ago. I had a twice the size of an encyclopedia cold directory that I could go through and flip and crisscross numbers back before everybody had cell phones. And that was one of the extent of your processing service without going out and talking to people and go, okay, what's going on here? Anyway, so the processing business, I think something I read was that business was called Due Process.
Correct. So DO process, like we do
all right.
Process service. Yeah.
And was when you first went into the bail bond industry, and just, I know that we'll kind of preface this a little bit, that you've got kind of an ongoing issue with the system over something, and I want to talk about it as best we can, but we'll have to be a little circumspect about it because of some of the restrictions that are in place.
So we can talk about, the only thing we can't go into is my actual complaint with the Judicial Standards Committee.
Okay.
But the lawsuit with the state and the federal lawsuit that we filed, I can explain both of them to you.
Okay, excellent, great. So when you first started in the bonding business, were you named Bad Boys Bail Bonds, or was that a name that you then picked up?
It was a name that I purchased. So
Okay.
when I worked for the owner, and at that time it was Bad Boy Bail Bonds and Slick Willie's or Shotgun Willie's Fugitive Recovery Service. Obviously, I didn't want the full name, so when I did purchase the company, I just basically purchased the name so that I could write it as a doing business as under due process. I just wanted the first part of the name, and then all of the phone numbers. Of course, if you understand the bail industry, once a phone number is established in a jail or in a county system, that's the thing that you're buying, is that phone number and the name.
Yeah, I've got an old phone number from a company that went out of business, 25 years ago, and it's just an extra phone number that feeds into ours. But it wasn't a question of, I just assumed the liability of that company. I just took over their phone number.
That's right. And it's a lot easier talking to bail folks when you're talking about buying a company. And even when we give classes to courts and to the detention centers, and you try to explain how the bail industry works as a business, you're not buying somebody's surety or buying their liability or all their bonds that they've written, because that belongs to them and their surety. I have to have my own contracts with my own surety and establish my own company. And when you purchase a bail and bond company, you're purchasing the name and the phone numbers. You're not purchasing all their past liability, all of their clients. It doesn't work like that.
So does Montana, is Montana all insurance-based bonding, or do they have some insurance and some property-based insurance, or sorry, bail bondsmen?
It's all insurance-based.
Okay, so they all have to be with, attach the power of attorney from the insurance company to the bond, that sort of thing. It's not, correct. You can't put your own property up and pledge to act as a pocket bondsman or a property bondsman.
Not in Montana, no.
Okay, so yeah, then if you purchased the name and telephone number from this company, the surety is still in theory the one that's backing that up.
Correct.
Okay.
And even if you write, like I write for the same surety as the previous company. Well, no, because they changed their name, but it used to be Allegheny and now it's AIA. So I write for the same company basically, but I had to establish my own, you have to put up your own property, your own money in order to establish that relationship with an insurance company. It's not a
your initial build-up fund or whatever it is you need to do to give the insurance company enough confidence that you're not going to simply write a bunch of bad bail and leave them holding the bag.
correct.
So what I've read is essentially that you bought the name, and that because you bought the name, one of the local courts in Montana decided that you now owed the liability, and there was an outstanding forfeiture. Is that correct? Can we go into that?
Yeah, that's correct. So I received a forfeiture notice on a bond that was about 4.5 years old. That was written by the previous company. And when I tried to explain that it wasn't ours, I didn't write it. It wasn't even the same insurance company. All of that was for naught. Just because I bought the name Bad Boy Bail Bonds, the judge insisted that I pay that forfeiture. And that's not the whole crux of it. I mean, Montana has a statute that forfeitures have a statute of limitations of 2 years. So that didn't matter to the judge that it had been 4 years old. The way that our MCA reads, the way our laws read, is that a forfeiture has to be processed, or you have to inform the agency and the surety as you would in a civil case. That never happened in this. So the previous company wasn't even informed of the forfeiture. And in fact, the previous, that bond, when I did the research on it, that forfeiture had happened, and then another company had bonded that individual out, assuming the liability. He forfeited again. He was rearrested. Another company bonded him out. He didn't show up for court. He forfeited again. And so the fourth time, he actually had to pay a cash bond. So the forfeiture ultimately was paid in a cash bond by the defendant. But for some reason, this judge wanted to go back to the very first bond company, which was the Shotgun Willies and Bad Boy Bail Bonds that bonded him out, and go after a forfeiture that was 4 years old.
So one of the accusations that's been leveled against, and this is a municipal court bond, right? As opposed to a district court bond? Okay. One of the allegations been leveled against municipal courts is that they're very much income driven. And a lot of times the judges there are their performance is gauged on how much revenue that those courts generate. And so I've had situations every now and then where, because my county that I work in has 17 different cities inside the county. So I've got 17 different municipal courts that I have to deal with. And every now and then you'll get some new judge that comes along and go, hey, we need some more revenue. What about all these bail bonds that are sitting out there? How about dig through these old warrants and find out what's going on? Fortunately, we also have a 2-year statute on that as well, where you can't go any further back than that. But every now and then you'll get somebody who wants to go dig through and find out this is a way to generate some additional revenue. And there's really not anything in Kansas. At the district court level, there's a motion for judgment on bond process. That doesn't necessarily extend to the municipal court. Is there a process they're supposed to go through at the municipal court level, like a motion for judgment on bond process, or is it just one of these things? Hey, we've notified you. Now you have this much time to pay us, or else.
So in Montana, the MCA says that they have to notify you. It turns into a civil case, so they have to notify you as they would a civil case. So you have to be served the civil process, and then normally you would do a show cause hearing where you would go in front of the judge and say, I owe the forfeiture. It's been 90 days. I didn't produce the defendant, or the defendant is stuck in jail in another state, or any of the other available remedies that would get you out of that 90-day forfeiture requirement.
Okay, so in this case, they didn't do that, and then just turned to you and said, hey, pay up, or they did it, 4 years after the fact and only gave you the 90 days after that 4-year stretch of time.
I never received the 90 days. Okay. I got a notice that said, hey, you have a forfeiture that wasn't paid from 4 years ago. pay up. And my initial argument was, this forfeiture isn't mine. It doesn't belong to me. All the other stuff that goes along with that, the statute of limitations, the failure to process it like a civil case, that doesn't even factor into it. It wasn't my bond. It was a 4-year-old bond, and there was no chance for me to. I had to file and go appear in front of the judge and argue it. But like I said, all of my arguments fell on deaf ears because there was nothing I could say showing the MCAs and showing how this should have been handled. I was told that if I didn't like it, I could file an appeal or I could pay the bond. I did file an appeal, and then the judge told me that I couldn't file an appeal and struck it from the record. So my only choice was then to pay the bond, and that's what led into where I am now.
So, because I've had this issue. Normally you don't appeal stuff at a municipal court. It's just cost of doing business, what you do. But I had one instance where I had to appeal a case out of one of the municipal courts, and it was it may be Kansas specific. Basically, the defendant was placed on diversion, and the Kansas case law on that is, once you're placed on diversion, that terminates the bond liability. Even if you violate the diversion agreement later on down the road, that's a whole separate issue. And that's black letter law in Kansas case law, that the diversion terminates the bond. And so this judge said, no, he failed to appear for his diversion revocation hearing. You're responsible. And so I appealed it and got it to the district court level. And district court level said, why are we even here? You're not on this bond, which sounds like the way it should have been in your instance here, but it wasn't able to get up to the district court. I mean, everything I've read about Montana is that the district is the appellate court for a trial de novo for the municipal courts.
So when I filed the appeal, I received back was a non-protunct order, basically saying that I was not a party to the case and I could not appeal it because it was a criminal case. Which, when you think about it, then what's the remedy? I'm stuck with, and my attorney at the time that was helping me with that specific case, it was flabbergasted and didn't know where do you turn to, and how do you remedy that if there's no remedy? I can't appeal because I'm not a party to the case, but now I'm stuck. What do you do? Basically pay it or else.
Well, it's one of does municipal court even have the authority to enter a civil judgment that you could appeal?
So going back to the beginning of this, had the bond or had the forfeiture been handled correctly, had there been a civil notice filed to the original bondsman, that would have started a civil case. That would have created a civil case for that bondsman, then to remedy that case, taking it outside of the criminal case that he actually bonded, because it would be a civil matter between the court and the bondsman then. But because that step was skipped, there was no remedy. You can't force yourself into a party to the case of a criminal case, even though you wrote the bond. That's why that statute exists. So once the statute, once you had a forfeiture and it went past the 90 days, you would have issued had it been done correctly, you would have issued a civil notice to the bondsman saying, hey, you've gone past your 90 days, you didn't produce the defendant, you now owe the bond or the forfeiture.
Okay. And so then there'd be a civil judgment and all the civil rules of procedure would apply for appealing that.
Correct.
Now, maybe clarify this for me, because I'm not precisely familiar with Montana law. I know that in Kansas, there's specific statutory language that allows a motion for judgment on bond to be filed as a motion within the criminal case, but it's a separate motion that's inside that is appealable. And that's always been the technique. Well, you can't appeal this judgment because the case isn't finalized. Well, my guy's completely gone and he's dead, whatever. It's never going to be finalized. But in Montana, you're saying they actually have to file a separate civil lawsuit, a separate criminal case or separate civil case to enforce that judgment on bond.
The exact language is they must notify the bondsman as in a civil case.
Okay.
So it's still vague, but bottom line is, had that notice, you would have a civil notice then to answer to. whether it was still listed under that same criminal case number or whether it created its own case number. But you would have had a civil notice of forfeiture.
So, and it was the judge that you were appealing from that claimed then that you couldn't appeal, or was it the district court judge kicked it back downstairs?
It was so the way the appeal process works in Montana at municipal court is you file the appeal with municipal court, then they push it to district court.
Right.
In this case, that never happened. It ended at the judge got the appeal and then issued another order saying that because I wasn't a party to the case, I couldn't appeal. But
Yeah,
that previous order still stood, which meant I still had to pay the forfeiture.
well, that sounds very much like a due process violation. I mean, it's an issue we've raised on these municipal courts. The way they do that before is like, there's supposed to be some level of process to take this from being my money that's on deposit to you to being your money. I mean, that just seems like a violation of the takings clause. But I'm sure that you'll discuss that with your attorney and get that stuff all worked out. Now, basically, they then suspended you from writing bonds in that court.
So, right. So then what happened was I knew that they were going to file a complaint with CSI. CSI notified me a few weeks later that they'd received a complaint. So I was waiting for that process to hammer itself out because, again, the complaint wasn't against me or my company. It was against the previous company. And they were notified of that. So that it should have opened some eyes, but that complaint process went all the way through the whatever process the Commissioner of Securities and Insurance went through it, and then it was found to have no, it wasn't a valid complaint, so it was sent back to the court. During that process, I had one of my bondsmen in Bozeman attempt to write a bond in municipal court. And when she got to the bond window at the jail informed her, hey, you can't write bonds here anymore. The municipal court has said that you can't write, they're not accepting bonds from you. So I got that call in the middle of the night. And then a few hours later, I got a call from a competitor company. We're friends, but we're still competitors. And he called me up in the middle of the night, which he never does because he doesn't work nights, but he called me up in the middle of the night and said, hey, do you know that they're not accepting your bonds at the jail? I said, yeah, I just found out about it. But I never received notice that I was going to be suspended from writing bonds or that they were going to block me from attempting to write bonds. I found out because we tried to post a bond. And then I found out that it had actually gone out throughout the entire state because I had a bondsman try and post a bond from court in Yellowstone County, in a separate county, and they pointed at a little note or a letter or a sign they had up that said, we can't accept bonds from bad boy bail bonds.
Ooh.
So
that, because now I've had, like I said, I've got 17 cities in my county that I work in. And so every now and then you'll miss somebody, you won't get the letter or the date will have run and you'll show up at the jail to post a bond for that particular city. And they go, oh no, we just got a letter. And you go, oh man. And then you go trundle into that city the next day and give them the money and they turn you back on. Just that's their enforcement mechanism. If you haven't paid, we're going to cut you off. But it doesn't cut you off in every single city. It's just the one that you owe the money for until you take it there the next day or whatever.
So, and that's so Montana and this is some of the issues we have with bonds across the state. Who knows what damage that has done? Because at the point that we found out we weren't writing bonds in municipal court, we started referring them to our competitor, to our competitor there in Bozeman, and didn't really get into the meat of the bond or where the defendant was or what jail they were in. But I did receive something from one of my bond agents saying, hey, they took our name and our business information off of the bond record that's posted out in the lobby of one of the jails. So I contacted the jail and said, hey, we still write bonds. We can write bonds in every other court and every other jurisdiction in Montana. We just can't write in Bozeman Municipal Court. But that whatever they sent out, whether it was oral or an email or whatever they sent out to all the jails, basically shut us off from receiving phone calls at all.
Right.
And some of those jails misinterpreted that, and they weren't accepting bonds at all, even on courts or in courts that we were still in good standing with.
Well, and how much district court business have you lost? For, oftentimes people will have, well, I have this traffic ticket here, and I also have this felony charge, and well, I'm only going to use the company that can do both of those.
And that's, and me and you understand that, but explain that to somebody that's outside of the system or doesn't understand the very small and intricate business we work in, where if I have a client that I've had for, several years or that I currently have on bond, maybe I have them on bond on a district court case and they pick up a charge in municipal court and they had a warrant at a justice court. Well, when they call me, now I can't write those bonds or reissue that district court bond because it's all tied together. I have to refer that entire client over to a competitor because he's not going to just write the municipal court bond and say, yeah, you write the big bonds, I'll write the municipal court.
Exactly.
So,
and then what happens when that client gets in trouble again? Well, they're going to call the guy that did the referral, not to you, even though you've built up that relationship. He might not be able to get me out.
Right. And I mean, I like my competitor. We get along. We're good friends, but I don't want to give him all of my clients.
Sure. I mean, it's not free for you to get clients in. The advertising and the work and the phone and everything else, every single client that comes to your door has cost you something, whether you write that bond or not, to get them to your door.
You're right. I mean, I could add to that. I don't know how to add to that. That's exactly right. I spend a lot of money in advertising and creating relationships and, training my bondsmen. And then I have to, as soon as they say Bozeman Municipal, I have to move that client off to another bond agency.
Well, let's move on to some other stuff here, just to maybe a little more comfortable topics, something less controversial like politics. So you've been in business, from what I read, and in bail bond business since about 2018. So it's 6 or 7 years.
Correct.
So, but you're also the president of the Montana Bail Agents Association. That seems like a pretty rapid rise. I know that the guys in our association been, knocking 25, 30 years. How did you become, so powerful?
I wouldn't say I'm powerful. It was due to necessity, basically. Typically we have a session every 2 years. So Montana has a legislative session every 2 years, and every 2 years, the entire bail industry tries to get together and go fight bad bail bond bills. In particular, this last session, there was some bills that we wanted to defeat, and then we also tried to run 2 bills. Before that, we were having conversations. So all during COVID, we had a commissioner's office that was trying to implement new rules, and during the COVID time, you couldn't go in and you couldn't be in person. So all this was happening during Zoom, and we got it pretty much shut down, but it opened up. I started calling around to all the agencies saying, hey, who is running the association? Well, they had an association years ago, but they were getting tired. Nobody would step up and take over. So I volunteered because it's a necessity. We have to, as bondsmen, have to understand that we can be competitors and adversaries, but in the big scheme of things, the bigger picture, we have an industry that we have to fight for and make sure that people understand the benefits of secured bail. So I volunteered. We had a meeting, put the association back together. I got voted in as the president. The previous president is the vice president, and we have a secretary. And then we have all the agencies that used to be in it joined back up, and it's been going strong. We actually had our first summit last year in Bozeman, of all places, at the Bozeman Detention Center hosted us for our summit. They had a big public area that we were able to utilize and had our summit in Bozeman. So I don't know that it was um, it was a volunteer and it was out of necessity. That's how I became the president of the association.
So how many bondsmen would you say there are in Montana? I know that, there's, I think, around 350 in Kansas.
So the last time I actually checked the roster and checked the list and licenses, I believe there's just over 78. I think there's 78 licensed bondsmen in the state.
Now, just kind of give us, just for everybody who's not from Montana, I think most people know about Montana these days is from the Yellowstone TV show, and I assume that John Dutton is not actually the governor in Montana. Tell us a little bit more about Montana.
So Montana is one big city. Think of Montana, and when you think of a state like Montana, you have to think of it in terms of a complete city. Yeah, we have our big cities. We have I don't know that they're big by anybody else's standards, but for us, Billings, Missoula, Butte, Helena, Great Falls, Bozeman are big cities, and our entire state population just passed 1 million during the last census. So we're just over 1 million people statewide. So the Montana bail industry is a very small and close knit. We all know each other. We all work together. It's a very, very, very small community. When I go to the national association meetings or go to like an ABC meeting or a PBS meeting, when you talk to people and you have agencies that are out of take Kansas City, how many agencies are in Kansas City?
Too many.
Probably take all of the bondsmen in Montana and put them in the middle of Kansas City, and they would do better there than they do statewide here in Montana, just because it's a small industry. It's a very needed and a very necessary industry, but it's a very small industry. So when things happen inside the industry, it's felt very quickly and by everybody. Where I think the difference between some of the states or bigger associations is there's a ripple effect, where in Montana it's a one fell swoop effect. There's no ripple. It immediately affects everybody across the state.
So 78 people, more or less, or so say 70 to 80. Population 1 million, but Montana, I believe, is what, the 4th largest state in landmass in the country. I mean, that's a lot of geography to cover for such a small. I mean, do you have to drive hundreds of miles to post a bond, or do you have people already set up in those areas, sort of part time?
So I have bondsmen in all of our major cities. So I have them spread out across the state. Montana has a system in place. It's called a teletype system. Basically, if you get arrested in one of the far-reaching cities, I use Libby a lot as an example. So Libby is 2 hours away from Kalispell, which is one of our major cities. I have a bondsman in Kalispell. Well, that bondsman doesn't have to drive all the way to Libby to post bond. They can drive to the Kalispell jail and post a bond with the jail in Kalispell, and Kalispell will, by message to the NCIC system, will send a message to the Libby jail saying, we have your physical bond in hand. It was posted. Everything's correct. Everything's right. Go ahead and cut your defendant out. And then that defendant gets out. The bond was posted physically at Kalispell Detention Center.
Okay, I see. Yeah, we don't. The closest we come to that is if you're, say, Johnson County is on the eastern side of the county, and if you're in custody on, say, a Sedgwick County thing, which is Wichita. In theory, I could post that bond while you're in Johnson County based on my authority here, returnable to Sedgwick County, to Wichita. But I couldn't just send down a piece of paper if the person was in custody in Sedgwick County, because I'd have to be approved in that particular district. It's not a statewide approval here; it's district by district.
So don't get me wrong, it's not a statewide approval. It is you have to be approved in each court district. So like every court, there's 207 courts in Montana. You have to be licensed and have gone through whatever process that court or that jail has put in place for you to be authorized to write bonds in that jurisdiction.
But once you're
so
approved,
not
you
a-
can do the bond remotely.
I'm sorry?
But once you're approved in that district, you could do the bond remotely from another jurisdiction.
I'd be careful about using the term remote because we're not doing it remotely. You're still physically meeting with the indemnitor or talking to the people, and you're physically delivering that bond to a jail.
Okay.
So you have to walk it in and physically hand it to the jail.
So what is crime like in Montana? I mean, I know you have a relatively homogeneous population, which usually is indicative of a lower crime rate. Normally, a multicultural or a less homogeneous population tends to have higher crime rates for whatever reason. But what is crime like in Montana?
So Montana crime is rising, particularly our fentanyl industry our fentanyl problem is affecting our reservations drastically. We have two major corridors coming through Montana, and our population isn't big, but there's a lot of places to hide out, and that's contributing to our increasing crime rate. The other thing that's increasing it is the system we have in place where bonds are we have an issue with bondsmen posting bonds, and then basically we call it churning defendants, where they will post a bond, and then because the jail is so full, the jail won't accept surrender. You can go to the jail, you can surrender your defendant. The defendant leaves the jail with the notice to appear before you're finished with all of your surrender paperwork. And then when they don't show up for their hearing on the notice to appear, you bond them right back out. I've had defendants call me from jail that have 30 failed to appears on 30 separate cases, thinking that they'll get bonded out because they couldn't get hold of their regular bondsman who's been doing this. Now they call somebody that actually answers the phone and says, "Hey, I need to get out." Well, you look at their rap sheet and say, you don't ever go to court. Well, I don't have to because my bondsman just keeps getting me out, and we have a system. Well, that's not what the bail industry is supposed to be doing. That's not
right.
We're in the appearance industry. We write a surety bond to make sure that you show up to court. So sorry, you're going to sit and do your appearance from the jail. So how that's contributing is that judges now are seeing these, there's just very few of them, but some of these bondsmen that are churning individuals, they're trying to figure out a way to usurp that. So there's a lot of ORs, very small bonds, and it's just if you're there, there's no repercussions to committing crime, then crime's going to continue to rise.
Right. Exactly. I mean, one of the strong aspects of bail is that there is a deterrent effect. If you have to call mom and have them come down and get you out, that sort of thing, that, maybe I'm not going to do this stupid thing I did to just get in trouble. I mean, if there are immediate consequences, and bail being one of the first immediate consequences of any sort of criminal act that you get caught for, then it tends to deter additional crimes from occurring. On this churn now, it kind of brings up something I had on my list of questions to talk to you about. Wasn't there, correct me if I'm wrong, because I thought there was some sort of Supreme Court ruling in Montana that restricted your ability to surrender somebody that didn't have a warrant?
So this is part of our judicial system legislating from the bench. There was a Supreme Court case. The initial case was, could you, as a there was a bondsman that was suing a prosecuting attorney and CSI. The question in front of the Supreme Court was, can you sue those government agencies? Instead of ruling on that, they opened up all of the bail laws and ruled that the initial cause of the incident, the bondsman shouldn't have been able to arrest the defendant and surrender them back to the court because they didn't have a warrant. Well, the law at the time was bondsmen could, for any reason, protect their liability, arrest and deliver the defendant, and surrender them back to any law enforcement agent, detention center, or court in the state.
Right, pretty standard.
The Supreme Court said, no, you have to have a warrant in order to surrender them. Well, it runs directly in conflict with the MCA. So the MCA 469-510 states anytime before or up to 90 days after a forfeiture, a surety can arrest and deliver the surrendered defendant back to the court. So how do I affect that arrest prior to forfeiture if the courts are now required to issue a warrant, but only at the time of forfeiture? Bondsman can't ask the court for a warrant, and we all know that stuff doesn't happen between 9 to 5. It's the middle of the night when mom calls and says, Johnny's getting on the bus and he's leaving the state. I don't want to lose my house. You don't have time. And that's why bail bonds work the way they do. Right. Bonds work that way because we have the immediate effect of we need to protect our liability. We need to protect our indemnitors and our victims. If that defendant is on the run, we need to be able to grab them and put them back in jail or surrender them back.
Well, and that flies in the face of, 200 years of case law on that as well. I mean, part of that, if you have to have a warrant, that's really crossing the line to making you a state actor without any of the protections. I mean, part of the bondsman surrender is that we're not a state actor. We have a private contract with the defendant, and we're not relying upon a warrant. It's disturbing that the Supreme Court would have made that particular ruling. Has the legislature revisited that at all?
So that ruling came out on January 30th of this year. So we haven't had a session since then. It has been discussed. I did testify in front of the interim committee. And so it's on the radar and it will be addressed in this next session. It's going to be where the legislature is going to have to start putting stuff more into plain language. It's almost to the point where we're going to have to write MCAs and laws in such a fashion that it cannot be misinterpreted. I mean, if I say how else, and this is a discussion I've had with several judges, how else can you interpret? I can arrest prior to or up to 90 days after a forfeiture. How do you interpret that as I can only arrest if I have a forfeiture and a warrant?
Well, you can't, obviously. I mean, if I don't know how much volume of case law there is on this in Montana, but there's a ton of it in every other state in the country that says exactly the opposite.
You're right, and because we have the most liberal justice or the most liberal Supreme Court in the United States, these are the issues that we run into. We have these are the battles we fight every 2 years, and not just every 2 years, but bondsmen across the state. We run into judges that want to interpret the rules or the laws in a way that is contrary to their original intent. So it's going to be up to the legislature. And one of the reasons I run is because there's such an issue with the judicial system rewriting laws or interpreting them in a way so that they will effectively not have to answer or not have to follow the current MCA.
Well, let's talk about your race here before we run out of time. You are running for the House in Montana, so that's one of the issues there. My understanding is that there's 100 seats in the Montana House. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so that means for the million population, each seat represents about 10,000 people.
Right around 10 to 11,000. Seven.
Okay.
So you're 11,000, depending on how it was gerrymandered during the last.
So you're probably looking at maybe 2,500 votes total get cast in those elections for something along those lines.
Right around that amount, yes.
Okay, so your target goal on that would be hit about 1,300 votes, then, right?
Yes.
Okay.
You did some research.
Well, I'm the legislative chair in Canada, so I look at a lot of these numbers as well. So, what when I looked at your district, it looks like it's recently been redistricted, but the last three people that have been in that sort of general district have been Democrats.
It's considered a Democratic stronghold. I was just notified by our local media that they interviewed several of the candidates. We have a candidate coalition in Lewis and Clark County, so We have all of our Republican candidates. We've been getting together. We go to events together. We do everything as a group. So we have
Right.
a coalition. We need to take back the capital city, and they all got, so a lot of them got interviewed by the local news media, and I did not. When one of my fellow candidates asked, "Why aren't you interviewing John Looney?" Well, because his district is a Democrat stronghold, and we don't think it's worth it because it's a Democrat stronghold. They're going to win it regardless. So there's no need to cover that. I think they're wrong. I think that people are tired of the political games, and I think it's going to turn red come November 5th. But it's just it goes to show that people need to get out and vote. They need to be aware of what's going on in their local government.
So one of the things we talked about was the time commitment to running for office and actually holding office. So I mean, and one of the things that you don't just throw your name out on a ballot. I mean, and go, oh hey, vote for me, I'm great. I mean, I assume that you're walking the district and shaking hands and meeting people and doing all that all the ground game stuff that the politician has to do.
Yes. So if I didn't have the support from my family right now, I probably wouldn't be able to do this. If I didn't have the support of the great employees I have with my company, I wouldn't be able to do this, because before I ever made this decision, you have to understand that you're going to be out of the loop for the 3 or 4 months of the session, and that's going to be your full-time job.
Right.
I run a company. So if I don't have people in place, if I don't have a system in place that can support the company while I'm gone, then I wouldn't be able to do this. But it's that important to me that I make it there and fight for the things that I believe in, which, during the last session, I couldn't get a hold of my own representative. I couldn't get hold of my own senator or my own House representative. That's unacceptable to me. If you're not willing to step up and do the job correctly and to the best of your ability, then get out of the way and let somebody that's willing to do that step up and do it. I think, for lack of a better way to say it, it's an integrity thing with me. If you can't do the right thing all the time, then step aside and let somebody that wants to and that can do it with integrity do it. You should answer to the people that you represent. They should be able to get a hold of you 24/7. And I tell this in my stump speeches everywhere. I'm a bondsman. Number one, what is the best thing I know how to do? Answer my phone 24/7, 365. It gets answered. So if you want to get a hold of me, call me. I'm going to answer. It's ingrained in me. I'm here to help people. I'm here to represent the districts. So
what sort of reaction are you getting to people on just like door knocking and going out to visit them? Are they sick of the current status quo? Or I mean, I know that Montana has a Republican supermajority right now, but what's the feedback you're getting from the people on the ground?
It's generally positive. I find myself when I knock on doors, a lot of it is surprising to me on how many people don't or haven't voted or aren't even registered to vote when you knock on their door. And so a lot of it has been going around and giving civic lessons. You knock on a door and they say, well, my rent went up by however much this year. Why is that? Well, then you have to get into the property tax conversation with them. And then, did you vote during the last? Well, no, I don't vote. I don't get into politics. Well, but now you're understanding that if you don't vote, this stuff is going to continue to happen without your input. Here's a representative standing at your door that wants your vote, that's going to listen to you, that is giving you my phone number that you can reach out to if you have a question or concern. Go register to vote and cast your ballot. Make your voice heard.
Well, it sounds like you should be carrying around some voter registration cards too. Here, hey, fill this out and send it into the election commission here and come vote for me. I mean, that's the traditional, the old school method to get out the vote is go out and, knock on doors and, hey, make sure you're registered to vote and make sure I'm out here. And here's the paperwork to do that. I know that my daughter gets all kinds of stuff. Unfortunately, she's registered what I view the wrong party, but they send her all kinds of mailers to make sure that she's registered to vote.
Well, I mean, I just went and redid my real ID. And when you get your ID, you get your real ID, you say they give you that, you can register right there.
Right.
Register to vote. It's one of the easiest things, and one of the most satisfying things is to participate in your local government, participate in the process, have a voice, understand the people that they're there to represent you. How nice is it to have somebody knock on your door and say, "Hey, I'm John Looney. I'm running in your district. I'd like to represent you. I'll be your voice. Here's my phone number. Here's how you get in touch with me if you have a concern." I visit businesses. I just visited a business. It's kind of an interesting thing that I was getting a computer fixed, and he's like, "You're running for office?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." He's not in my district. His business is, but he said, would you look at, if you get in, would you look at this? I get these computers that people never come back. I fix them and they never come back for them. Well, I have to store them. I have a whole storage unit full of laptops now because of the whole Hunter Biden issue and data. I can never get rid of those, and I can never sell them because I'm not sure, even though I have a contract that says if you don't come back 90 days later, the computer belongs to me. But how much trouble does that cause if you can't take possession of a computer that has data on it? And what do you do with the data? And is the data part of the computer? I said, well, that's interesting. What else? Where else does that? He's like, well, think about all your cell phone repair shops, the people that bring cell phones in. If they never come back for them, what do you do with that data? Is that data, do you have to destroy it? Am I going to get in trouble? Is it 90 days? Is it 120? What do we do with that stuff? And why isn't there something that covers that?
And so, liability, right?
It's those kind of conversations. I love running into people that are thinking about problems or issues and having a conversation with them and saying, hey, vote. And here I am. Here's my number. That's really interesting. I would like to investigate that and see what we can do to fix that.
Well, and a lot of times people just want to be heard. And if you can be a vehicle for them being heard, and just as an example, I mean, like I said, I vote one party in particular, but I had somebody was running for mayor and actually came into my office. And my office is directly across the street from the library, which is a voting station, and talked to me for like 20 minutes and then asked if she could put a sign out. I didn't ask her a party. She's the only candidate that has ever come by and talked to me at my office and was like, sure, put a sign out. Good to go. Thanks for talking to me. I appreciate that. Don't really know your policy positions, but you're the only person that came out here and listened to me talk and came to me to talk to get my opinion. And so, sure, I'll put a sign up for you. And I think people really appreciate that from their elected officials.
Right. And it's not hard. I mean, I'll stop it. I like to talk, probably not as much as my wife likes to talk, but I like to talk to people. My wife she'll call me and say, hey, are you going somewhere or visiting somebody? I'm like, oh, I'm going to go out and knock on doors. She says, all right, well, I'll see you at 11 o'clock tonight then, because you start talking to somebody and then I like to talk to her. I like to hear people's stories. I like to hear people's concerns. And then I think it's just, I don't know if it's ingrained in me, but coming up with solutions. There's got to be a solution for every problem. There's got to be a way to fix something. So if you have a problem, let's figure out what the solution is.
Well, I remember, and this is probably dating me, but I remember then the Bill Clinton as being the comeback kid. And basically, he'd lost in Iowa and he basically had to win in New Hampshire to maintain his candidacy. And he ended up winning that way. But a lot of the people that voted said they'd met him personally. So, I mean, he put in the time. He was working, 18-hour days, shaking hands, talking to people, being at every event to get his name out to people. And he was personable and people appreciated that he was coming to them and they came out and voted for him. And that was where he got the title Comeback Kid. Now, whatever your position is on Bill Clinton, from purely a political actor, being out there and getting in contact with those people made a huge difference. I did have a question, because we do, I talked about there's not a whole lot of bail bondsmen in state government. And we do have one in Kansas. But I remember when he initially ran, he was running in a contested primary election, and there was a mailer that was sent out from one of the PACs that basically had, his name on there and a pair of handcuffs and some criminal looking guy on there. It's like, he's a bail bondsman, which means he helps criminals get out of jail and commit more crimes, sort of thing. It was just trash political mailer, but I didn't know if you'd gotten any sort of negative mailers in response to your candidacy, or if it's that hotly contested.
I have not. So one of the biggest issues that we're running into is the local candidates aren't getting the press or the coverage that they probably deserve, because we have one of the highest or the highly contested tester Sheehy contest going on right now. And so I don't know, everybody else's news feed probably looks like mine. It's a tester ad, Sheehy ad, tester ad, Sheehy ad.
Right.
That's what we see. As far as bondsmen, I tell everybody I'm a bondsman, but my reputation in the industry, my reputation in the law enforcement community here in Lewis and Clark, it's funny that you say bondsmen have a bad, everybody sees bondsmen, but that's not what we have here. I think everybody understands, and we have, you can see right behind me my Constitution hanging on the wall. You're innocent until proven guilty. And we help people get their loved ones out of jail and get through the system. We believe that you're innocent until the end of your case, and however that pans out, you're innocent until proven guilty. I'm not getting bad people out of jail. It's everything we write is pre-trial. It's you're innocent. You're fighting a case. It's a lot easier and a lot more effective to fight a case from outside the system than it is sitting in jail. It lends itself to your family being there to support you. You're able to continue working. You're able to support your family. And there's a less likely chance of recidivism. Bondsmen do the best job that the government can't do in this. The pretrial services system that we have set up in they're testing across Montana. Bondsmen have been doing that for years, and we've perfected it. Why are we trying to let government come in and do the same job from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, when we're available 24/7 and we do it for free, or not for free, but at no cost to the taxpayer, versus letting the government do it from 9 to 5 at a cost to the taxpayer? It makes no sense. And when people say that we're the bad guys, I don't get that. We help everybody. We run a victim protection program here in our office does. So we look out for the victims as well as defendants and helping people through the system.
No, I agree. Obviously, that's the line of work that I'm in as well. So the campaign, if anybody wants additional information, what's your website?
It is looneyformontana.com.
And that the FOR, not the number 4, right?
It's FOR, Looney, FOR, Montana.com.
Okay. Any other ballot issues besides the tester race you think are going to drive people out that'll have an outsized impact, or is it think just it's the Senate race?
I think the Senate race is going to have the biggest issue. I think that the next biggest issue on everybody's mind is just the economy, and in Montana right now, property taxes. Property taxes are a hot topic for everybody, and trying to figure out how to deal with that and not just move the liability around. There's got to be an answer, and I know the governor's working. He has a property tax group working on answers for the property tax issue, but that's what's on everybody's mind. And unfortunately, until we sit down with a bill and start hammering out numbers, there's not really a good answer for it right now. The best thing I've heard so far, one of my fellow well, a senator actually sat down with the senator and he said the easy way to fix it is make Montana less desirable. People keep moving in. The more people you have come in, the more property they're buying, the higher the property taxes are going to go.
Mhm.
So I have some ideas, but we'll have to sit down. We'll have to sit down and hammer out the numbers.
Well, it sounds like you've got your ducks in a row as far as a plan. Now you just need to get the votes out to get elected for that.
Get registered to vote.
That's right.
Have a voice in your elections.
LooneyforMontana.com. We'll see if we can't put up, a trailer on that as well, just to show what that website is. Hopefully a link or something like that. John, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today. It sounds like you've got some challenges, but at least you're throwing your hat in the ring and trying to make a huge difference there. So I hope best of luck to you, and hopefully that'll go well for you.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
We would like to thank our guest, John Looney, for taking the time to speak with us today. If you're near Helena, Montana, and need a candidate to vote for, or if you're outside Montana and think having a bail bond voice in the legislature is a positive thing, then please visit his campaign website for more information. And we hope you'll join us next time on the Bail in the Midwest podcast, where we'll continue to bring you critical information and conversations with people involved in the criminal justice system.
For more information about John Looney, visit him on the web at looneyformontana.com. Join us again next time for the Bail in the Midwest podcast, hosted by Shane Rolfe and executive produced by David Stuckman.